Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. Hello dear viewer and dear listener, my name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Let me welcome you again to another episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. As always, I really urge you to subscribe. Just hit that subscribe button, please. And as I said earlier, if there are opportunities for partnering with us, feel free to contact my PA to see how you can be part of this and partner either in terms of marketing and advertising, or we'll let you know how you can be part of us. But for today, I have a very exciting guest indeed. His name is David Mompati. He's a colleague in the sense that we share a building here at Mogobe Plaza, the CEO of Duiker Global. Welcome to the studio, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Could you start the conversation off? I mean, this is a very interesting conversation. We're going to talk about structured finance. Could you just start it off by letting the viewer know who you are and sharing a little bit about your background?
Yes. I am a Motswana who spent a lot of time outside Botswana growing up. I spent a bit of time in the USA and in the UK, and that exposure, I think, was quite beneficial in my life in the long run. I studied in a different field to what I'm practicing in now. So I'd just like to say that to anyone who is feeling a little bit misplaced in the education. Education is often a stepping stone. It's not the end of the road. It's a means to an end. I studied in the computing cycle. So I was trained as a computer analyst. But I've never worked in computing analysis. I've worked rather in project finance. So became quite exposed to the world of capital raising, financial markets, debt and equity instruments by virtue of being involved in projects that required finance. So whereas a lot of your project people are, your finance people are coming in from an institutional perspective and start off, say, for instance, with an institution or a bank, I started as a client, from the client's perspective. What do clients need to be achieved as their requirements vary from project to project. Okay. So I worked in very large projects that successfully raised and re-raised capital over a number of months. And we saw what it is that investors and institutions require in order to fund and do so successfully. Okay.
Which institutions do you study at, and also touch a little bit about the institutions you worked for?
Yes. I studied at the Indiana Institute of Technology in the U.S. state of Indiana, and then came to Botswana for the rest of my career. I was based in Botswana until earlier on this year. In terms of where I worked for a company called CIC Energy, which will be familiar to most Botswana. CIC was actually the sponsors of the Mamabula Energy Complex, and successfully raised money both from private individuals as well as on the stock exchange in order to achieve their goals. Now, the fact that the project didn't actually start producing power as planned was due to circumstances beyond CIC's control on the market end of things. But in terms of the analysis that was required to get you to the point of funding, that was very thoroughly done, competently done. And I think history has vindicated CIC that indeed there was in fact a business case for the offtake of power.
Okay. Yeah. What triggered your interest in, shall I say, more like finance and financial issues? What really triggered that pivot from computers to finance?
Yes, I was among Botswana's earliest investors on the Botswana Stock Exchange. At the age of 17 in 1997, I bought some shares in Barclays and in FNB and in Mopani Gold Mine.
Wow.
And I would say from studying high school commerce, I have developed a very keen sense of the power of an understanding of financial markets from a very young age. And I was encouraged into the sciences by scientific parents. But my passion has always been commercial operations and the development of business, really, more broadly. Okay. And so when I was employed by a project that initially took me on a project management basis, but within that project got exposed to the world of capital raising, I felt this was what I've been crying for all my life, essentially. This is what I've been called to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned your parents, and I know you're the son of Dr. Mompati, very famous in Francistown.
Yes. Yeah.
How did he influence perhaps this move or this development you mentioned?
The biggest legacy I can thank my parents for is a background that instilled very strong morals, a sense of a moral compass. I think for you to be a successful businessman, there are always shortcuts that will be tempting during the course of your career as a businessman, but follow your moral compass, essentially, because in the long term, that's what pays off. Shortcuts can only get you so far.
Okay.
So one of the things I can thank my parents for is that sense of right and wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Duiker Global.
Yeah.
Can you just explain the business model, perhaps in simplistic terms, such as a toddler can really grasp it? Yeah.
We'll be glad to. Duiker Global was birthed from the experiences we had at the company I founded before. I founded Duiker Advisory, which is a Botswana company designed to package a project in language that an investor will find convincing, and to position the project such that it's ready for finance, from a valuation point of view, from an appraisal point of view, so that your investor says, okay, if I give you my money, this is what I expect from you, and on taking certain reasonable assumptions. I mean, nobody can really prophesy the future in great detail, but you're able, through proper financial practices, to be able to say, this is a reasonable or a fair value of this project in so many years, all things being equal. And these are the sort of things that investors want to appreciate before parting with their money. So Duiker Advisory was set up to do that. But in our discussions with investors, then came the opportunity to create Duiker Global. Duiker Global, different to Duiker Advisory, is actually a funder itself. We appraise projects on the recommendation of the clientele or the clientele's representatives, and if it's an attractive project, we will actually take a position in that project. It might be a longer term position, a shorter term position, but we ourselves as Duiker Global are now in fact the funders.
So is it an equity sort of setup? Do you normally take a percentage of the shareholding, or is it a debt proposition type of thing?
So it varies again from project to project. Some projects require that's a structured finance discussion, because there are projects that benefit from a debt position versus those that benefit from an equity position, depending on what the project is achieving. There are some which think they require debt and think they require equity that actually need quasi-equity, which is somewhere in between the two of those. There are others which might not, which though requiring finance might not actually require cash, and we can then arrange instruments that are able to facilitate finance for those projects as well.
So Duiker Advisory is part of Duiker Global.
I call them cousins.
Yeah.
Duiker Advisory is the older cousin, because an advisory company is acting in the interest of the client, and then a funder is just a funder. So Duiker Advisory acts in your interest as a client. When you come to them with a proposal, they find the best way to structure your proposal. It might not necessarily be always in favor of a funder.
Okay.
It might be probably in your favor more because you're their client.
Yes.
Whereas Duiker Global, based in the UAE, is a funder. We have mandates from funders from asset holders whose assets we're managing, and we act predominantly in their interests as well as ours.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, in terms of the type of projects that you consider,
Yeah.
What can you tell us?
The types of product, for us, the story is an infrastructure story at Duiker Global. We believe very passionately in Africa's future as not only the greatest continent on the planet in terms of its potential, but good business sense. And we believe that, I think, with every fiber in our being. And people talk about African poverty. Poverty is an opportunity, not only for yourself as the entrepreneur, but also for the so-called victim of poverty to transform their lives. All they need is someone to believe in them. And that's exactly what Duiker Global is about. Now, of course, we need to pay the bills. We need to make the bottom line. But we're saying Asian economies have benefited very, very well from access to capital. The Europeans had it before everybody else. America, a few years later than the Europeans. It is now Africa's turn to have access to capital and to have the opportunity for infrastructure to be built that is going to put us on a much better footing than we've been before.
In terms of the type of projects that you fund, we're talking agriculture, we're talking, you say infrastructure, but you have to break that down, isn't it?
Sure. So infrastructure in the sense of, I'll give you an example. If you travel with Kenyan Airways, and no offense at all is meant to my beloved Kenyan colleagues, they have a fantastic airline. But I think they would agree that they can't compare their airport to, say, for instance, Dubai International. So we're saying, why can't they be? Because they've got the volumes, the foot traffic, they've got the airlines. Why can there not be the same infrastructure that you find in Dubai at the Kenya International Airport? And the same, that's just a story that can be sung throughout the continent. We need the roads, we need the bridges, we need the refineries, we need the gated estates, we need the shopping malls, we need the universities that can make us compete on a global level. And that is really the song that we are singing at Duiker Global. That isn't to say we won't fund agri-projects. Agri-projects are often hindered by the lack of infrastructure themselves. But predominantly, we're interested in transforming economies, both at a macro and at a micro level.
Okay. So what would you say are the key competencies that Duiker Global offers?
So there are a lot of funding organizations in the world. You have the giants who are influencing policy on a global scale, like the BlackRocks of this world. We also have an agenda, but our agenda, as I said, is more about driving transformation predominantly in the so-called quote-unquote third world. So our agenda is purely about transformation, no other strings attached. And that I think is a competency, because what increasingly projects and entrepreneurs are finding is that they're hindered by considerations that aren't about business. It's about whatever other objectives are in vogue at the time. We're strictly all about the numbers. Do the numbers make sense? And can the numbers be justified? And if they can be supported and the due diligence bears it out, well, the project then is deserving of funding.
So in terms of personnel, what do we have? Not necessarily names, but in terms of positions at Key Global.
Yes.
At Duiker Global.
So Duiker Global is at the moment 6 months old. So we're still we're already disbursing. I mentioned in a previous discussion that we're disbursing to clients in Botswana, and we are building our team in Dubai, which is where the company is going to be based more permanently. For the most part, I need to qualify that it's Dubai predominantly, but we are opening offices. We've recently created a division in the Caribbean, and the next steps are Switzerland and Singapore. The whole point of doing that is to get closer to where investors are, so that they have an office to walk into right down the road in terms of being introduced to African projects. So we're just at the beginning, really, of a massive recruitment exercise as well as an expansion exercise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why Dubai?
Dubai is a very, very attractive global hub for a number of reasons. It enjoys a very business-friendly environment. It's a remarkably business-friendly environment with straightforward laws, very low crime, very tough on crime, and generally with the world's leading infrastructure. It considers itself a city of the future, and with that forward-looking mentality, we find ourselves quite at home. I find the words of Sheikh Mohammed very inspirational in what he wants to do for his people. Everything is all about his people. And I think for those reasons, there's a lot that one can learn from
Currently, he's
him.
joined the space race.
Exactly. He's and the man's vision is unlimited. It's absolutely unlimited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in terms of numbers, can we talk about the types of financing? You say you've already disbursed. Are you able to share the categories where you've already started disbursing?
Yes, we've started disbursing in view of infrastructure projects here in Botswana. There are some that are non-infrastructure. They're appearing in a slightly smaller role, along the lines of agri sector projects. There are others that are commercial projects. There are a couple that are trade finance instruments, and there's two that are private equity projects that are being disbursed as I speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, a couple of weeks ago, I had a call from a gentleman, Maung, saying that he wants to sell me a plot. And I said, what is the plot for? He gave me a figure. He says, no, I need to raise 350,000 for a due diligence at Duiker.
Yes.
I said, you have to spend that much for due diligence?
Yes.
And I said, ooh. So here's your chance to clarify how all that works.
Yes. Due diligence is a necessary evil. We consider it a necessary evil. It's not revenue for Duiker Global. It's paid to a lender's advisor or a transaction advisor who does the vetting, the assessment, and generally takes on the liability of us making the funding decision based on what documents we've been given. So the due diligence fees are priced in dollars. That's why they're so expensive, you know. But
35,000 US.
That works out to about $30,000 US.
30, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But generally speaking, if you've been in the funding industry for very long, you know that that's probably not too outrageous. We've done some at the Duiker advisory level. We've done some transactions where local funders require due diligence as well at much more expensive rates, sometimes running into 2 million pula for each of the projects. So it's not cheap, and we recognize that. We're working with a local company here to be able to extend finance to those who have a brilliant concept, a brilliant opportunity, a brilliant idea, but might not have the due diligence fees readily available.
Yeah. And how does it work? Once you found that 350,000 you paid to Duiker Global, what happens next?
So Duiker Global will then collect that on behalf of the lender's advisor, which is a company based in the UAE, a legal firm based in the UAE. That legal firm then does its assessment. So they vet both the project as well as the project sponsor. So our
the entrepreneur, in other words.
The entrepreneur, yes, exactly. Our emphasis isn't on the commercial due diligence. There are several streams that you could consider. It's on the legal and as well as the KYC due diligence. So those are the two streams that we're most interested in. We're prepared even to fund other aspects that might be required of your project, such as, say, EIA, technical studies, bankable feasibility studies. Over and above the due diligence.
What I'm asking is whether that can be funded by the initial 350,000 or whether you'll have to now top up.
350,000 is used for the due diligence, after which, when your project is approved for funding, then we will fund everything else.
Okay.
We also offer a refund of your 350,000 should you have a reason not to be funded following the due diligence.
In other words, if you fail.
If your due diligence fails, we guarantee that a refund will be paid.
Yeah.
Because those, as I say, are not Duiker global revenue at all.
Yeah. Okay. Then in terms of, but the guy who's doing the due diligence still gets paid.
Yes.
So, but you've built it into your business model, I would imagine, to minimize the risk of that.
Exactly.
You only get involved when there's serious prospects of success.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Now, you spoke of your experiences in sponsoring or dealing with other major investments or structured finance situations. Can you share some of your success stories in that regard?
Yes. So I'll go back to the CIC example because its information is in the public domain. CIC successfully listed on several stock exchanges and raised capital of stock exchanges. It was quite a good training ground to be involved with a company that was doing so at the time. We got to understand what it takes to go into a listing. Prior to that, CIC had successfully raised private equity, and we got a very thorough understanding of what it is that a private equity investor requires in order to be comfortable enough to participate.
Yes.
CIC was preparing for bankable feasibility, so we got an understanding of what it would require to prepare a brief for debt finance. And therefore, that then informed the kind of thinking we bring to the Duiker global the Duiker global space. So I would say in total, CIC raised over 8 billion pula over the time that I was involved. Yeah,
this is very exciting stuff.
Yeah, and 400 or so million Canadian dollars at the time. Okay. So inflation taking into account, that would sit at 8 billion.
Any exciting numbers yet from Duiker Consultancy or Duiker Global?
Yes, we're disbursing. Our entire pipeline for disbursement is $1 billion US, and that is only going to increase over time. And that to us sounds like a lot of money in Africa, but on a global scale, it's not. It's absolutely peanuts. To put it in proper perspective, Saudi Arabia is building a $1 trillion city as we speak.
Yeah.
So, what's $1 billion?
And this is to be disbursed over a period of?
So our intention is to get through that within a month. To have disbursed it within a month.
Is it possible?
We've been working very closely with local bankers in relation to that, and we think that with their cooperation, it is. What we need to do is to make sure that the laws of the land are satisfied. And I think that would be, if any, the only cause of delay. So we're working not only with our bankers, but with our local attorneys to get proper advice in terms of making sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. Yeah.
For any entrepreneur to get where you are, there must be plenty of scars.
Yes.
Can you share some of those war stories, as it were, where you suffered setbacks and challenges?
Yes. Some of the experiences are quite, I would say, acute in terms of the experiences we've had. One of the ones was where I spent quite a bit of money, which I hardly had at the time, my kids' school fees, to go and meet an asset holder overseas. And upon arriving, as I said, a great cost to myself. To my surprise, this asset holder, it wasn't a question of did he have the assets or not. He certainly did, but who he was. It turns out he was a former head of state of a country that was war-torn, and he himself was suspected of war crimes, and therefore would not be the kind of man whose money you'd want to borrow to build your hotel.
And there was no way of knowing in advance?
Not at all, because he was trying to use what money he had before it was frozen by global authorities. He was fronted for by respectable-looking organizations. So that was one of the most acute war stories I can relate to, because we spent a lot of money to get to where
You just discovered when you saw him, or
exactly. We discovered when it was already far too late.
Yeah.
When we had to say, listen, I'm sorry, I can't help you with participating in our story, but I really can't.
And the lesson from that is?
The lesson from that is always probe as much as you possibly can with robust means. And that's something that we practice very vociferously. In other words, before taking on investment money, we ensure we understand who exactly it is we're dealing with.
Yes.
And to, having a vision is one thing, but it's very important along with that vision to stay firm, to stay with your feet firmly planted on the ground in terms of being cautious and sensible and applying your mind to decisions.
Now, any other war stories to share?
Yes, a couple of them are in order. We looked at a few gold investments in Kenya, and sometimes we'd meet people who probably were on the wrong side of the law, but we had, again, a similar situation of not really knowing who you're dealing with until it's a little bit too late.
Yeah.
And a few close calls where you'd hear that the person you were dealing with or speaking to, not really dealing with, but speaking to, without having worked with, later you hear that he was involved in some sort of a criminal scandal, and you shake your head and say, really, that was a close call.
Yeah.
But apart from risks to one's person, I think the biggest challenges that we have faced is the lack of funding for ourselves. We've had to make things happen by paying our own way and working from pocket. And I'm sure, as any entrepreneur can tell you, that it takes a while to get to where your business is stabilized.
That's true. Okay, now in terms of the ecosystem in Botswana here, you mentioned that 1 billion is peanuts compared to. What would you say about the ecosystem and its development versus the international setup? Yeah,
absolutely. I'm going to be very complimentary about our home country. In many ways, Botswana has done a fantastic job in terms of taking time to build institutional capacity. We're not quite there yet, but I don't want to be overly negative. There are, however, too few options available to entrepreneurs, and especially where it's a project that lacks a background or a sponsor who lacks a background. For instance, if you're a high net worth individual, your next project is likely to receive bank finance. But if you're not, and yet you have a very good concept, that concept should not be penalized because you are not a high net worth individual. Because the merit of the concept is not really influenced by who you are. And I think that presents a gap in the market that perhaps doesn't exist in Silicon Valley or in Dubai, or to increasingly even in countries like India.
And how do you bring that to the attention of the authorities?
Well, we believe that there is a role for government in the running of a country, but ultimately we believe also in personal responsibility. So if I see a gap in the market, what's to stop me doing something about the gap and working with the authorities to ensure that I'm operating within the law, but bringing the solution myself. Yeah. So we I tend to agree with the mindset of an opportunity economy, an economy that favors opportunity versus risk, and for those reasons, we have the view that there's a lot of solutions that Botswana have, remarkable solutions that, allowed to flourish, will make a massive difference for all of us.
I was privileged to attend your launch recently at GIEC, and that was a pleasure. What were you communicating to the public, and did you succeed with that launch?
We were communicating, our intent of the launch was to sensitize the public, first of all, and to take control of our own narrative. We want to be responsible for the messages we send that are circulating to the public around what Duiker Global is all about. So the launch was really was an introductory launch, both of our company as Duiker Global, based offshore as it is in Dubai, but nonetheless owned by Botswana, with a heart for the country, and with Botswana really being the first destination of our current fund. So we're operating several funds at Duiker, and this fund that we're launching now is the first of many.
So how was it received? How have you been received?
I think we've been received very well. There has been some guidance from responsible state institutions that we're taking very seriously on board, because for me this is more than the vision of one man. It's not really about that. It's about solutions for the country. And so one of the things that we're realizing is that in order to have seamless flow of funding, we may need to contemplate the establishment of an infrastructure bank, similar to NDB, that uses private sector funds as opposed to public sector ones.
And so there's a possibility of us seeing Duiker Global Bank.
It might be a different name. Maybe I've overused the Duiker one a lot, but it might be a different name. But nonetheless, the concept would be an infrastructure development bank, and not a retail bank like your FNBs and that sort of thing. More along the lines of Rand Merchant Bank, where we'd be able to fund infrastructure through that mechanism. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about mindset. I mean, when we're prepping for this show, you talked about the attitude should not be about monetizing the asset. It should be the other way around. Can you explain that mindset and simplify it for us?
So one of the things that goes on in your mind as the entrepreneur are thinking about a life in the world of business or in the corporate world is the risk of failure. And if you look at the root causes of failure, there are many, but one of the most common, I would say, is that often the mindset is, I have a diamond mine opportunity, I have an asset, essentially. And the thinking is, how do I monetize the asset? So you go to FNB, you go to Barclays, and you say, I want to monetize the asset. But true entrepreneurship is about seeing a problem that then creates a market. And then what you monetize in that case is the market, not the asset. So in other words, you realize that there's a gap in this particular space, and I'm going to monetize this gap. What does it take to get money from this market and provide what it is that it's going to allow you to draw revenue from the market? So that way you then have business from day one. You don't have to market as much as the guy who's monetizing the asset.
Yeah, this is a very interesting concept. Can we think of an example to clarify it?
Yes. So but we have this concept in Africa that Botswana has been owning the mines, in Botswana especially. So it's time for Botswana to own a mine. Well, the question is, Botswana, once you own the mine, what are you going to do with those diamonds? I'm sure there's where I can sell them. I can sell them to DTCB. Have you looked at the pricing? Is it competitive? Will it pay the bills? And that sort of thing. And you're actually literally beginning to see mines that have not really done well, even though they're diamond mines. They haven't done well as anticipated financially. And yet
some had to close.
Some even had to close. Some are on sale. Whereas it's much more efficient to develop a concept based on an existing need. I'm trying to think of a non-proprietary idea right now. Well, I'll just use the Duiker one. There's a need among our community and beyond for investment capital. And they don't have access to that investment capital to the degree that they could. So Duiker then said, listen, this is a gap. What can we do to meet that gap?
That's great. That's a great way of looking at it. So supposing I have an infrastructural project that qualifies, and I say I need, let's say for argument's sake, 500 million. What do I have to do? What was the next step in terms of the process? Yes. So
with a Duiker global solution, what we'd be mostly looking at is fundamental economics. So I could use the example of a rail spur between Mamabula and Mamabula being, for those who don't know, on the way to Francistown from here, about 150 kilometers from Gaborone. On the right-hand side. That's right in the middle of a very massive coal field, right? So there's a huge coal field there, not too far from the surface. It's a sea of coal, and it's stranded. Stranded, I mean it has very few options besides overland road transport to the market. And just across the border from Mamabula, there's 2 massive power plants in South Africa that have often put out expressions of interest for the supply of coal. So there's a fundamental economic case there for the development of infrastructure that is much more efficient at getting the coal from Mamabula. Whether it's a conveyor belt, it doesn't. Our mind might leap to a railway line, but it could be a railway line, it could be some sort of a conveyor belt, whatever it could be. That then presents an infrastructure opportunity. Another one we could look at, for instance, is the brief example I gave earlier about the Kenyan airport.
Yes.
That the numbers are there. They've got the airlines, and therefore that justifies a serious upgrade of the infrastructure that handles both the cargo and the passenger traffic.
And if they're going the Dubai route, they have to set up massive shopping malls within the airport.
Exactly.
Keep people busy.
Make it a center of economic activity on its own. Yeah.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about the world of structured finance from the point of view of your role models or your heroes.
Yeah.
Who are they and why?
So, structured finance, I was inspired very much by the CEO of CIC Energy, a gentleman by the name of Greg Kinross.
Greg Kinross.
Yes, he was 34 years old, CEO of a multi-billion Pula project at 34. And the man's mind was astounding. And I think I'd say he's probably been the biggest influence on the way I think in terms of the world of finance. One of the things that necessitates the structuring of your finance is that how your finance is structured can have a bearing on whether your project ends up being a white elephant or not. It's so crucial to get the financial structure correct at the beginning because it can become very expensive later on. So that a perfectly viable concept becomes unviable simply because of the way the project is financed. So those are some of the learnings that we made.
Which other heroes do you have out there?
Other heroes and role models.
I thought you mentioned someone in the Forbes 400.
Elon Musk inspires me for his ability to think outside the box. I think that is the biggest attribute I can give him. He is not a conventional thinker. I remember he was at a podcast similar to this one, and he mentioned that he bet his last millions, his very last millions, after he had at some point been a billionaire. He was down to millions, and he was running on fumes, and he bet his last millions on the rocket project, which was at the time coming out of a lot.
Actually, he said that he was looking at Tesla and SpaceX.
Yes.
And he realized that there's a 10% chance of success.
Yes.
And because it was important enough, he took the risk.
Yes.
Just because there's some point of, he's not focused on the 90% chance of failure.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I thought that is very interesting.
I thought that he tends to be one of the people whose type of thinking I find very, very necessary in today's world. Creativity is an essential part of innovation.
Yes.
They're not the same thing. The creativity is that ability to think outside the box and to create something that it hasn't really quite been done before.
Yeah. Now, what then in all of this is your attitude toward risk? Because we do have an issue as a people, we're a little risk averse. Where most of us are first-generation entrepreneurs.
Yep.
What is Duiker's Global's approach to risk?
Yes.
And risk management?
We think risks should be calculated and understood And once you've done that calculation, once you've done the mathematics and you understand the risk, we encourage you to go all in and take the risk. We believe in an opportunity economy, not a risk-averse economy. For anything to change, whether it's a government, a people, a community, society, a person, for anything to take some sort of risk should be taken for transformation to happen. And there's nothing that is to be feared than fear itself. And
that's Roosevelt.
That's
FDR.
Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, FDR. The FDR in his major speech.
In his major speech.
Yeah.
A wise man said. So we are of the view that the fear that I will fail is often the reason why progress then doesn't happen. Now, the problem with a lack of progress is your economy ends up looking the same way 15, 20, 30 years down the line. It remains the same. It's working, it's paying the bills, but it remains the same. Whereas Dubai's economy, which was at the same level as yours, is on a completely transformed level in the same period of time. Now, that isn't to criticize government. As I say, I don't believe that is the government's role to run my life. I have to take personal responsibility. Why don't I take what it takes to build the skyscrapers that Damak builds in Dubai?
But you need dynamic leadership. It needs to trickle from the top.
Isn't
it everything rises and falls on leadership?
Leadership is crucial. But at the end of the day, you're the leader of your own life. And whatever it takes, bite the bullet, put your head on the block, risk what it takes to make things happen. And I think you'll find that leadership eventually comes round to the party.
Now, let me talk about the future outlook. Thinking of David Mompati as an individual, and of course, Duiker Global.
Yeah.
What can we foresee 10, 15, 20 years down the line? Do we have some kind of roadmap?
Yes, we certainly have a roadmap. Our roadmap involves several key initiatives. The major one is to widen our asset holder network, the individuals who entrust us to manage their assets. We want to widen that by approaching them. So we're going to be, as I said, increasing the number of regional offices that we have. We've started in the Caribbean. We'll be looking at the jurisdictions I mentioned earlier, being Switzerland, Singapore for the Asian market, and Switzerland for the European one, and then eventually London for commercial reasons. That's assuming the policies stay business friendly in London. So on the commercial level,
it's a good point, seeing that the Prime Minister is already in trouble.
Yes, I would say she suffered more than just a setback, but I think her heart was in the right place myself. It's sometimes the problem is the job looks a lot easier than it is when you're actually in it.
Outside, yeah.
So on the Duiker Global front, we want to significantly expand the fund holders we actually deal with and give them the comfort they require in order to make the move to invest in Africa.
Is that to say you're targeting FDI, aggressive foreign direct investment?
We think that that's where the capital is. We think that for us to make significant impact in terms of economic transformation, and we're not setting policy for government. We're not saying government this is what you should do. We're saying this is what we can do. How do you as a people like it? People of Botswana, people of Zambia, people of South Africa, people of Namibia, and so on and so forth.
Okay. So apart from setting up offices in these locations, what can we envisage? Is there something physical that you picture 10, 15 years down the line?
So I picture projects all over that are shovel ready, all over the continent, being well financed with a structured proposal that's bespoke to their own circumstances. I picture a transformed economy of Botswana. I picture a transformed CBD based on some of the projects that I've been exposed to here, all as a legacy of what we've been able to achieve. I picture a situation where an ordinary Botswana can own a railway that will create thousands of jobs. I go back to the example of the stranded coals. With those coals that are parked to market, there's no reason why 10, 15 coal mines could not be created in that locality, which mine at the same rate as already happens at Mogobe. And you can imagine the economic impact that would create.
Yeah.
So that's where we see things being transformed and headed towards.
Yeah.
And we think that there's every reason why that should happen.
The biggest lament that we keep hearing is the need to develop the supply chain. That too often there's very little, manufacturing locally and things like that. And if you look at it in the context of AFTA, that seems to be the major impetus. What is Duiker Global's position in all of this?
I think personally, manufacturing outside of South Africa while SACU exists will be very difficult to pull off. Something has to be done about SACU. SACU makes local manufacturing very uncompetitive on a global level. And what you want is a situation where the protectionism that keeps SACU very profitable to South Africa is lifted, and you can then get cheap inputs for your manufacturing that then allow you to make cheap or globally competitive products for the wider world. That is the key to developing Africa's industrialization in the southern region. So what SACU currently provides essentially is a very
It's a stranglehold on
stranglehold on industrial development. It may have other benefits in terms of to the fiscus, in that it's an easy check. BRS collects, but even their collection is outmatched by SACU. It's literally a check from the South African Exchequer that the government gets. And so it's easy to get that easy check rather than to bite the bullet, forgo that easy check, and yet allow for industrialization.
But isn't that what AFTA was supposed to be all about? I'm not even sure Botswana has ratified it yet, but isn't that the intention, to loosen that stranglehold and either rewrite SACU or get rid of SACU?
SACU's the problem that SACU provides is in creating import tariffs. It means that whether you want to manufacture a fence, a very interesting fence that's not manufactured anywhere else in the world, the input costs to production of that fence are artificially higher than they need to be. Because immediately an import tax is levied by SACU. And therefore your ability to produce that at a rate that outcompetes Brazil or whoever else may be in the market for your global customer is compromised. And so the protectionism is the problem. Now, if AFTA removes protectionism, well and good.
Isn't that the intent? But of course, they've given themselves a very long stretch of time.
They've given themselves a very long stretch of time, and my view is that we need to go back to the era of the nation state setting its own policy agenda. It's not entirely necessary that states band together to achieve policy objectives. The problem with that is if you create, for instance...
The thinking is that there's power in unity.
There's power in unity, but there's also loss of responsibility and accountability simultaneous to that. So if, for instance, you're being run from a multi-state level, how do you vote those representatives in? At what point do you meet that representative and query him on what he's doing in your name, right? So I'm a firm believer in the empowerment of the individual and thereby the individual country.
I almost forgot to ask you about interest rates. If somebody comes to you, is there an advantage? I suppose what I'm asking you to do is to compare and contrast sourcing money from local banks versus coming to Duiker Global.
Excellent. That's a very insightful question. In terms of comparison with the local cost of capital interest, we look very attractive on a percentage basis. But to be frank, it's important to remember that you're borrowing in US dollars. And if you're borrowing in US dollars, that needs to be taken into consideration. You may find that the fact that it's a dollar-denominated loan adds a couple of 100 basis points, in other words 2 to 3% to our own interest rate. So if we're asking you for 4 or 5% interest rate on the instrument that we're giving you, because of the fact that it's borrowed in dollars, you may find that your actual cost of capital, because of hedging and the need to make sure that you're able to pay back the loan over time, works out to where you're now no longer at 5, but you're actually in real terms at 7.
Which is still, in some cases, lower than local.
Yes, it tends to be dollar-based, and global funding tends to be significantly lower than African rates.
And what about the repayment period?
Repayment period, depending on your project, it could go up to 15 years.
15 years, eh?
Especially if the majority of the funding is going toward something that is being developed.
Okay, so the competitive advantage that you have is with regard to interest and the length of time.
The length of time, as well as our collateralization, tends to be not reliant upon your assets.
You don't have to give a house?
You don't have to attach your house.
Okay.
Indeed, no one would have enough houses to build a railway line.
Yeah.
So we have to find alternative means of
what sort of collateral then do you use?
So we tend to use instruments, financial instruments as collateral. There are a number of options available on global markets for that, and a number of providers of those. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now let me ask you the Zaga question.
Yes.
Is there serious Zaga in your industry, sir?
There is.
Can we make serious Zaga?
Yes, and I actually am dying for some competition.
Yeah.
So you can make the serious Zaga indeed.
Yeah.
It is, of course, as you can see, an industry with a market, and that means that there is the opportunity there.
Would you encourage a youngster, starry-eyed, maybe with a degree coming out of university, to venture into the world of structured finance?
Indeed, I would absolutely do that. There's an entire world that we are just a small player in. Yeah.
But does it take a lot of time and effort to really immerse oneself and to get the level of competency that someone new like you has gotten?
To sound the way I do, and to be able to do what I do, I would say you should be able to achieve it within 5-6 years post employment.
But you have to be really, really interested, isn't it?
You have to be. The passion has to be there, because it involves applying your mind to what may appear otherwise to be quite technical concepts. Yeah.
You say appear otherwise. What do you mean? They're not really technical?
I enjoy them, so they don't feel very technical to me.
Yeah.
But I wrote my own financial model template and several iterations of it and that sort of thing. I think that the computing background helped me to code appropriately and that sort of thing. You just have to have the drive, really.
Yeah.
At some level.
Okay. Now, chance for you to ask me a question, sir.
Yes.
If you have one for me.
I do. I would say, how do you find? How do you find the response to this excellent podcast? I think it's a wonderful initiative.
It's been good in terms of numbers. We've had some explosive responses from the likes of TikTok.
Yes.
And we've also are growing steadily on YouTube.
Yes.
I think we're heading to 10,000.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
And having CEOs of note like you is going to certainly help us. But the important thing is that I can get a lot of feedback from youngsters, entrepreneurs, and people of that nature saying that the podcast has benefited them.
It is, yeah.
There are times when I feel a little despondent and discouraged because I have to finance everything personally.
Yes.
When there are not enough sponsors coming forward.
Sure.
But I always say to myself, that in the long run,
yes,
it benefits the ecosystem. It benefits
absolutely
the young entrepreneur out there. So it's been a nice ride. In the last almost 3 years, we've been doing this. It's been great.
Well, I was going to say, in that regard, our interests are very much aligned.
I agree. I guess that's why we're in the same building.
Exactly.
In concluding our conversation, sir, unless you think there's something I've forgotten to mention?
No, not at all. I think it's been an excellent interview.
Okay. Face that camera and talk to that viewer, leave them with one final inspirational message as we part ways.
Well, dear viewer, thank you for your attention to date and for finding out about our personal journey. I just want to say, if we can inspire you to believe in what it is you're dreaming about and to keep striving even on the stormiest day, if we can just achieve that, we would have, I think, made a milestone today. I'd like to speak to you personally as the entrepreneur that those storms, they're worth it. Those failures are worth it. They're just simply stepping stones to your success. I know that sounds like cliched motivational speaking, but I'm speaking as someone who's actually lived those experiences. So in that regard, I wish you all the very best.
Okay. Can you please share all your contacts, even on social media?
Yes, absolutely. So Duiker Advisory, the Botswana-based entity, has a website that contains the contact details of how to reach us in terms of locality, which is this building, as well as via emails and so on and so forth. Our public phone number, I've forgotten it now, you'll have to bear with me, is on there as well. Mm-hmm. And then in Duiker Global, please reach me on chairman@duikerglobal.com. As I said, we are based in the United Arab Emirates. Wherever you're traveling to UAE, feel free to look us up and give us a call. We have an office in the UAE that will be able to welcome you.
Okay. Thank you so much. You've been a great guest, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I enjoyed this interview.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
You've been a great host.
Okay. Thank you.